So I would like to introduce our panel. We've got to my immediate left, Sowmyan Ranganathan. He's the Senior Director of Information Governance and Legal Operations at AbbVie, and he also is the Chair of Legal Operations of the Legal Operations section for the ACC. To his left is John Albright, Chief Legal Officer and Corporate Secretary at Hub International.
Far less interesting title.
And to his left is Susan Hackett, CEO of Legal Executive Leadership, LLC.
Thank you.
We regret that Lisa Zizicki, who is on the program, is not joining us tonight for this conversation about legal department challenges and needs. But I think we've got a high-powered group up here, so we'll soldier on. So I want to dive right in and ask you some questions about your talent challenges and needs. I'm going to start with you, John. As the leader of a legal department, what are your biggest talent challenges and needs today?
So if we start with needs, we always start with capacity. And I got a vendor email today that said 43% of in-house legal professionals think they're understaffed. I'm not sure I've met anyone in the 57%, but if anyone's out there, maybe you can find me after the program. Focusing more on the legal needs, without getting into too much details of the internal budgeting process, we, like a lot of smaller legal departments, our total legal department's 25 to 30 lawyers, depending on whether you're counting contractors, are top-heavy. We have a lot of attorneys, and as we operationalize functions and outsource to disaggregated legal services providers, like a lot of folks, we are displacing internal lawyers and law firms with more creative legal solutions. We are finding that project management and the ability to delegate, which lawyers don't always inherently have those capabilities, not to mention the fact that we're able to push more work down to admin level or paralegal level people, is kind of exacerbating the top-heavy paradigm that we're already facing. And it's interesting, so we don't have a legal ops lead. We have a number of paralegals that look after various functions, and from what I've seen, and when you dissect it, it makes sense. Paralegals generally have more experience managing third-party vendors than lawyers do, and I'm not including law firms in that. The law firm relationship is different. They've been managing your CSCs of the world, your registered agents, your e-billing platforms, all of that, and they're used to working with them. They're used to problem solving. They're used to delegating. When we've put lawyers in those roles, because we're kind of all hands on deck, we find that they're, rather than trying to solve the problem, and this isn't true in all the cases, sometimes they just stop using them or engineer around them, because that's what you would do if you're not happy with a law firm. So, we're starting to deal with how do we backfill those capabilities, which are very new to most lawyers, and piling onto that is, if you look at what our operations initiatives, automation hasn't really played a big role yet, but it's coming, and that's a big part of the longer term strategy. That's where the project management and the technical acumen really come into play. So, kind of focusing it back on why we're here, I think what it presents from an opportunity standpoint is we could bring younger lawyers in and position them to help with some of these newer operationally eccentric tasks, and really just have a more integrated service delivery model. So it's probably not uncommon for what a lot of people are struggling with, but we're seeing a skill set shift and a workload shift simultaneously, which really just kind of expounds the problem. So,
Lisa, what John is raising is so important, and I know we're going to spend a lot of time, and Sam will probably have a lot to say about some of the operational and business practice aspects of how legal practice within law departments and law firms is changing. But before we move to that, I'd love to bookmark something that you just talked about. You talked about what's happening is a lot of pushing the work down, right? And I think that the most important challenge coming out of the disruption that we're all facing, especially as we look at change issues, is how is it that we're raising lawyers up? We look a lot at what it is that's spiraling down and how it is we can make it more efficient, how it is we can lower the cost of doing it, how it is we can improve those kinds of operational lean efficiencies. But nobody's talking about what we're going to do to create higher use for the lawyers who used to do those tasks. And so I think it's really important to have conversations about data analytics and the algorithms that'll run the department and all the other kinds of stuff going on. Incredibly important. But we really have to spend time talking about what we're going to create as what's next for not only mature lawyers, but rising lawyers coming out of law school and rising through legal practice and getting experience. Because if we only focus on how we're pushing it down and not how we're looking for higher use for lawyers, we're not going to have anybody who's going to be willing to change.
Well, they're
because there's no place to go to, right?
They're interdependent.
Exactly.
And lawyers tend to be individual performers. They sit in their office and they do their work and they bill their hours. And our historical hiring is from large law firms and other corporations. Suddenly, they're having to work as a part of a team. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. We tend to focus on the efficiencies, but we will not achieve those efficiencies if the lawyers aren't fully on board and a part of the process.
What they used to do, right?
Exactly. It's the delegation challenge.
Actually training them on things like project management. And you talked about project management being important to you.
We are, that gets into the whole budget discussion. So we're not doing as much training as we'd like to do, but we are partnering we have deep project management expertise in our IT organization. If you ever need money, just go to your IT organization. And we're partnering with them. We're basically pairing lawyers with project managers, Six Sigma type folks in IT, and you'd probably stop short of calling it training. It's basically real world immersion, but they're learning as a part of that process.
So let me ask, what are the tools that lawyers need to have in their toolbox today to be successful? Sam, you're managing legal operations for a large legal department. What are the tools that need to be in a lawyer's toolbox today?
Yeah, let me take the larger, what I've heard from the ACC Legal Ops folks' perspective. So I want to make 2 points. One is there is a study, I think it was from Legal Leadership Council, where they talked about the biggest gaps that they see in the legal profession. This is the in-house legal profession. And they identified a variety of topics, and it's very interesting because they're all very legal ops related, right? Vendor management, project management, outside counsel management, knowledge management, and technology innovation. So they identified these topics as the ones with the most gap, right? And so I feel like the legal ops professional today, I hope there are no other legal ops people here. We're a service group to a service group. So ideally, right, we should also be moving up the curve in terms of what we provide and helping you guys, who are the lawyers in the audience, become more proficient at some of these functions, right? So part of our job is not just to do outside counsel management, it's actually help you become better at it. And so when I look at that being the gap, and when I talked to my colleagues at ACC, most of them, when I look at, we actually made a list of all the priorities they have, and it's shockingly the same things, right? The most important thing is vendor management, internal resource management, prioritization, AFAs and convergence programs, diversity and inclusion, spend management, cost reduction, RFI of RFPs, and budget crisis management. These are the kinds of topics they're talking about where they're really, in each of these cases, they're working with attorneys who need to have the skills to effectively deliver this, right? Each of these topics. So ideally, we shouldn't be really, as legal ops, be focused on this. I think the future holds much better promise if we can standardize it and allow lawyers to perform at the top of their license, which is what you guys are saying, right? To make this easy, make it easy for you to manage it. And I think part of what IFLP, I hope, does is to build the skills for you to make this easy for you as well.
Susan, what are some of the other skills that lawyers need to have today besides just project management, vendor management, that type of stuff?
Well, I think there's a long list. And I have to say, when I first started working in this area, we started focusing on it in the early 2000s at ACC. I was very interested in trying to create the next race of super lawyers who would have in their toolkit every one of these different kinds of varied multidisciplinary tools.
We'll buy a couple of those when you figure
exactly,
that out.
Exactly. So sure, they would have legal expertise, and they would have deep expertise in an increasingly specialized area, but they would also have the financial skills and valuation skills. They'd understand personnel management and team building. They'd have leadership qualities like EQ and the ability to move people through change practices. They'd be involved in knowledge practices. They'd be thinking about different ways they could deliver service. They would be part of the executive team, on and on and on. And for those of you who follow this kind of stuff, Amani Smathers came up with this great analogy a couple years ago. I think several other people have picked it up as well, the T-shaped lawyer conversation, where the base, the stem of the T is that deep legal expertise that's 3 miles deep, but across the top is the 3 miles wide of all of these other kinds of multidisciplinary skills. So I started off by saying I thought it would be great if we could build this race of lawyers who had it all. And I've started to come to believe that that's not really what we need. We need lawyers to understand all of those kinds of things, maybe get deeper into those elements on that top bar of the T that are necessary for them. But what we really need for them to do is to understand how to collaborate with other people who've got those skill sets and to get over their gosh darn professional arrogance about the value of these multidisciplinary skills. I mean, lawyers have this real problem in practice of thinking that whatever they're doing is the most important part of it, and they either don't play well with others in the sandbox or they don't even realize what it is that other people bring to the process of solving a problem or driving better results or making use of technology or doing all of these things operationally that will create better results for their clients. So there's a whole list of things you could put in the toolbox, but I don't want anybody to take from that conversation that it means that the only people who will be successful in the future are the people who can check every one of those boxes. It will be people who know how to work with folks who've all got skills in those boxes on interdisciplinary teams.
Yeah,
and that's really the key for me is this whole lawyer, non-lawyer thing has got to disappear into the vapors of the past, because we really need to be thinking about how we're all going to do it together.
Well, and those lines are blurring.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah, and some of these guys are actually managing virtual law firms in-house. When I talk to other legal ops folks, they've built virtual law firms now. And so these skills, they don't have to have them entirely, but they have to understand the frameworks, be able to build better solutions working with the folks who have the ability and skills with them.
Yeah, but in-house, it's such a natural thing. With law firms, I have never thought they really had a very good handle on respecting and incorporating all these skills. Sure, they had someone who was a CFO. Sure, they have people who are in marketing. Sure, they have people who are doing pricing work or project management, but they've never really incorporated them as if they're co-equal members of the team. They are the staff. And in-house, when you're looking at this, it's a much more natural progression to realize that what we're looking for is for lawyers to take advantage of the skill sets that their clients deploy. Mm-hmm. Only in law do we think it's innovation to have contract management. Okay? I mean, there's that kind of automation and those kinds of systems have been in companies for decades. And the idea that we look at this stuff as if it's what's Casey Flaherty's favorite word? Dancing unicorns, farting rainbows. That, as if that's the, it's so wild and wacky, all of these innovative practices. They're just the kind of business practices that clients, who are the folks who are the owners, if you will, of the law departments that serve them, have been doing. So this ability to collaborate and pull in these disciplines is not only desirable, it's frankly your job requirement. Because if you can't work with finance when you're in-house, you're unemployed. If you can't work with the IT department, you're unemployed. It's not an option. It's the environment you work in. You're the minority in a corporation, not the majority.
Blended teams, cross-functional teams are becoming the norm.
Exactly.
And, I think some of this hierarchy that you touched on is generational. We learned that in law firms, right? When I started the practice of law, there were separate attorney dining rooms and crazy things like that. The generations coming out now, the generations that we're training they're not going to have that baggage. And they're going to look at this more as we're looking at it, it's more of a solution-driven and a team-driven approach.
Right.
And, that's what we're all engineering.
And lawyers won't be the heroes of the story. On the teams that solve problems, lawyers will be co-equal team members. They won't be superior to anyone else. They will be contributors, just like everyone else, hopefully at very high levels. I'm not trying to insult or lower the value of what they do. I'm trying to get lawyers to recalibrate the way they think about what their relevance is. It's not to be the shining star of the team. It's to work well with all the other groups who are necessary in order to create a solution to a problem. It's collaboration.
So in order to find these folks, how are your talent acquisition strategies changing?
Look, we've historically hired from big law firms and other corporations. And, if you're hiring from in-house, they have some of that. If you're hiring from a law firm, it's generally a niche position. I need an M&A lawyer or something like that. And there's a training course there. We could hire the best M&A lawyer from Cravath. We're going to have to train him or her. So, how it's changing is, we just hired a compliance director. JD was optional. Project management. There were all these buzzwords we've been talking about were what we were looking for. So, as hiring managers who have only had several channels, that creates challenges because we're out of our comfort zone. But getting to the point of some of the things that IFLP is doing, we never really looked at law firms as a viable option because law firms are very good if you look at their historical footprint of training associates and judicial clerks. Programs like this and opportunities that don't require someone with 5 or 6 years of experience are opening that up. So, I could see in the foreseeable future that we start looking at law firms as a direct hire channel, which larger companies are probably already doing that. Smaller legal departments historically are like, well, we don't have the ability to train them. Well, if they're joining a team, the team is going to train them. And, the fact that they don't have some of this baggage, they may be quicker studies.
It's still baptism by fire for us, right? When people go through the first few iterations. We hire from law firms as well. They go through it and they learn through the process in a lot of ways, and a little bit of guidance from legal ops and finance for the skills that they need around the topics of interest to us. But many companies do have training available to them. The law firm model, though, is a little different, as you point out.
And I think if you're a law department whose structure is based on creating an in-house law firm, you're going to be in trouble if you aren't already in trouble, because law firms already exist. There are great law firms out there like Chapman that do incredible work. You can hire those nice folks already. What you're supposed to do in-house is supposed to be at a different level with different focus. So, this idea of creating a talent pool that mirrors what it is that law firms do in their law firm practice is crazy. The last 4 or 5 departments I've been working with on re-engineering the way that they're working and looking at their workflows, we've talked about where their next hires are, and the solution that we've come up with, or the mantra that we're all saying, is if you hire another lawyer in your law department, you get another lawyer. That's good. But if you hire an ops type person in your law department, you multiply the effort of every other lawyer in the department times 3. So for a department of 7 or 25 or even 100, why wouldn't you be looking at your additional talent coming in, bringing the disciplines that you don't have, rather than replicating more of the disciplines that you do have or that you could get from a law firm or from some other kind of legal service provider? That's just, to my mind, the better way to go, is to look for ways to multiply your impact and make it measurable. And focus on what it is that you have to keep inside that's indispensable, rather than simply staffing up to capacity.
Well, we have embraced the TLawyer, the so-called TLawyer, and if you look at law firms are training I-lawyers, and they're getting even more specialized. They're a mile deep in one thing.
Bless their hearts.
And well, we need that. I mean, we're going to need the $1,000 lawyer to opine on a number of things.
Deal.
Anything broker-dealer related, yes, I'm calling one of those.
I understand.
So if you look at part of the training is we are forcing the T. We're making them the so-called mile wide, and it creates some inefficiencies early because you have multiple people. We had multiple lawyers involved in our GDPR analysis, the General Data Protection Regulations, not because we needed them, but we wanted multiple lawyers to be well-versed on what the requirements were, because historically, when I joined the department, everyone was siloed. If we had someone go out on leave, we were in trouble, because that institutional knowledge went out on leave.
Well, and I think this raises one other issue that I'd kind of say is in some ways a segue into some of the other things you're going to talk about for the rest of this program. I'm the daughter of a historian, so history was always a big focus in our house, and I still love reading it. And one of my favorite historians out there is a guy named Yuval Harari. I don't know if any of you have been reading some of his work over the last few years, but he's just come out with a book recently. It's called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And one of his main theses is that the skill set for the future, if people wish to be relevant, or put differently, if you wish to not become irrelevant, which is what we've often been talking about in the legal profession, the skill set of the future is agility. It's the ability to be able to think deeply and well about issues and help people solve problems using what is necessary to solve that problem, not necessarily to be in that stem of the T, or as you would call it, the I, or even to be across all these disciplines just by themselves. It's the ability to be able to reinvent your career as it needs to be reinvented with each new thing. When GDPR comes out, whatever's next, like GDPR, people have to be able to respond, to develop a solution, or to look at a way to address it. And so this idea that you would come out of law school, you would develop your singular expertise, and you would pound that nail for the rest of your career is just crazy now. Kids coming out of law school now will have 8 or 9 careers. And I'm not talking about the number of employers, I'm talking about what it is that they become expert in delivering. And that's great. But if you look at this as I've got to hold on to my I, right? And there is no I in team. But if you look at it, yeah, exactly. If you look at it, as I've got to hold on to what I used to do, as opposed to saying, great GDPR, whatever's next, whatever's flowing out, I want to be in the middle of that. You're going to be irrelevant. The way the profession worked before isn't going to work in the future.
You have to be adaptable, and you have to be able to work outside your comfort zone. And those are not always terms you hear associated with the traditional lawyer.
Yeah.
All right. I think that we have we've set the stage for the rest of our speakers tonight. I want to thank you all for joining us and sharing your thoughts about your talent challenges. And we're